Well, hi, and welcome back to AWS or Art with Sylvie. I'm Sylvie, and yes, I'm an artist, but I'm also someone who's very intrigued and drawn to talking with other artists. I hope today you enjoyed this short video because we're going to go and speak with April Rimpo. April is a watercolorist who is today taking us into the behind the scenes of how she works in her studio in Maryland in the USA. Maryland, USA is a million miles from where I am in Australia, but we managed to beam in and get a lot of insight about not just how to do this subject, which is all about cyclists, but also just how you can stretch and different ways of presenting your watercolor art. So for those watercolors out there, hope you enjoyed this short video. And if you do, we'd love you to subscribe and also maybe share the video on your social media pages. So sit back and here's April. Welcome back to AWS to show us today how you actually work. So we're not going plein air, but we're going kind of plein air studio, if you like. You know, give us an insight of just what you've got on your studio to prepare for this work and what you've done already.
Okay, so I think I talked last time about the fact that I take a lot of photos. Today I'm going to be working on a bicycle painting, and so a group that holds a triathlon, they come through the town I live in and I photograph them. And then at some point in the future, they become paintings. Then I go through a process of working through, first down selecting to which ones I think will work. And then sometimes I combine two. I did that in this painting that I'll be working on today, where I'll take writer and position them the way I want them to be positioned relative to each other. And I do that in Photoshop. Sometimes I play with colors in Photoshop in order to kind of get a sense for how I might want to do the painting. And then for this painting, I then also did a value sketch so that I could kind of decide how I wanted the background to work around the riders. I always make the background blurred, nothing distinct in the background in order to get that sense that they are moving past it. And so there's really nothing focused about the background, so that I could kind of decide how I wanted the background to work around the riders. I always make the background blurred, nothing distinct in the background in order to get that sense that they are moving past it. And so there's really nothing focused about the background.
And so when you're doing a lot of bicycles, and they're whizzing past you and you're snapping your photos and just trying to capture the angles and the colors and what you need to play around with then and construct your picture, how many bicycles is too many? Do you have a bit of a philosophy on, how to actually construct the composition, particularly when you're looking at a subject like bicycles?
So I've done several paintings that were just a single rider, so it was close up, a little more intimate. And then I don't even know how many were in the one that I had the most riders in. It was actually a race I wasn't able to photograph, so I had a shot. So it was a ride that was through DC, and I had a conflict that day, so I couldn't go down to DC to actually see it and photograph the riders. But I knew their route, and I had photos of some of the buildings on the route. So I lifted riders from the race that comes through my town and put them in that scene. And I don't know, I had a lot of riders in that scene.
Do you know what your focal point is going to be before you start this work?
Well, sometimes there's a particular rider that I kind of am trying to feature a little bit more. And in this one, that's sort of the case, but all of the riders are important, so.
There's a lot of cyclists over here, particularly in Canberra, in the capital city of Australia, where we have the most amazing, fantastic, I must say, beautiful riding paths which take us through a park, because Canberra's like in a big city in the bush, so it's kind of like a park city. So everywhere you go, you're sort of surrounded bush and the park, and we have a big pond or lake, not as big as the one in Geneva, with a spout with a fountain in the middle as well. So I know that many people who might be watching this who are cyclists and thinking, you know, all those years of riding, wouldn't it be great to capture that and maybe have something on my wall that gives them that spirit, that memory every time they look at it, of that experience that they had. And that's what you do, April. You capture the magic of what people are doing in their lives, you know, whether it's riding or anything else. So, and you do that with birds as well, with the beautiful pelicans on the back of the Love boat, which we saw in the first video when we first met you. So I think without further ado, take us through to having a look at how you work. I'd like to just let you carry on, and I'm just going to sit here like I'm just sitting in the room with you, which is great, and watching a little bit about what you're doing.
Okay. So this is the piece that I'm working on right now. And I have these stretcher bars sitting on top of the paper just to kind of show you that this is going to be a gallery wrapped piece. So all of the painting around the sides here is what actually will go around the edge of the stretcher bar. So when I'm painting, I have to keep in mind that, you know, that if I want light colors at the top of the painting, well, the top of the painting really starts here. And this is what's going around the side of the painting. So I start with the underwash, but and then after that's done, in the case of this painting, and often in my bicycle paintings, I take watercolor paint and I brush it on a piece of bubble wrap, and then I create these little patterns that you can see here. You can see what some of these little circular patterns are that I actually place them in areas where I know I want to have some of the darker colors, and they're to kind of remind me as I'm painting along to go darker there. But they also add a lot of really interesting texture, and I also use an acrylic medium in order to force some of these light spots as well. At this point are covered in masking tape, and before I paint, I wanted to at least pull off some of the masking tape over this rider because all the stuff around her is pretty well done. Well, I don't think I'll be painting back in around her. So I had done her to a point where when I did the first underpainting, I had not covered up her back on purpose, because you can see that some of the underwash is now on her back, which is well lit. And that will kind of translate when the painting is done to being like dapples of shadow from overlapping trees that have caused some of these color blotches on her back. So it's hard to tell at this point because I'll have more work to do on her to finish her up, and you can see that the bicycle itself, I've preserved areas that will be, you know, where the fenders are and some of the lighter parts, and I still need to come in and add the darkness around the tires. This area is still pretty much just the first wash. That's always a lighter color. I do that because it always makes the painting kind of glow from within when you have that as a backdrop to the rest of the painting. Paper itself is 21 by 29. So it's just about a full sheet of watercolor paper. And these containers are full of paint that I have already added water to. So I have them in a liquid form that makes it very quick for me when I go to do the painting, because now the paint's all ready. They're all their own wells. And I tend to mix my colors on the paper. So I'm going to start with a fairly light color. This is just kind of a, let's see, it's a raw sienna light. And then this is, I often make my greens by just using phthalo blue, but this painting I decided I was going to use phthalo green. So phthalo green is a very harsh, non-natural color, but because I'm painting it on top of the raw sienna, it blends to a really nice natural color. And I try to keep a little of the purple showing because I like that little extra touch of color. So I'll actually add a little bit more in. This color scheme that I'm using here is mostly a green, orange, and violet painting. It's one of my favorite triads, and you know, a lot of people will. The triad is, you know, like red, yellow, blue, but there are, you know, as you work your way around what we call the color wheel, there are really lots and lots of options of how you pick those three colors that you want to use. Most of the paints I use are Daniel Smith paints, and they have some colors that are actually made from minerals. And this color happens to be called Green Apatite Genuine, apparently. It's a really nice color, and if you thin it out a lot, you know, it can be a very pale green as well.
It looks very lush and beautiful.
That's why I love watercolor. You know, I'm not like trying to create any specific shape within this background greenery because, you know, if I put the paint down and just kind of let it do its own thing, it's gonna do it beautifully, right?
When someone has purchased your painting and they have it already framed and ready to go and hang on their wall, if they ever decided to change the frame or whatever, is it possible to take a framed watercolor, which is on paper, and unframe it and then sort of stretch it out and put it under glass so you can actually get the width of the paper, like you're painting right to the edge? So is that possible or not really?
No, if I have stretched it around a stretcher bar, I actually, first thing I do is I mount it on a hard panel. And this is the panel that it will be mounted on. So I use an acrylic medium to actually attach the paper to the panel. I can, it can be removed from the stretcher bar back to the, in this case, 16 by 24 inch size, so that it's cut evenly with these edges. And then you can just frame it straight, you know, with a frame right at this edge. Or if you have a very talented framer, they know how to add little extensions so that you can have a mat and a frame around it with a traditional look. Some paintings I just feel like the under glass treatment is the right answer, and others, you know, I mount the panel and I frame them without doing the gallery wrap. But almost all of my bicycle paintings, I have gallery wrapped.
Well, as I can show you, the one I did behind me, the reflection is terrible, you know, and I get a lot of sun, which is great in living, but I don't want my glass shining. So I've learned a lot from you on that front, April, about watercolors and just how you do it a bit differently. And looking at this lovely background you're now putting in, you're getting such soft edges, and yet the paper was dry. Is that correct?
Yes. So starting out, my paints are pretty wet. So I like to, you know, I didn't invent this. I've heard other people use this analogy. But when you add water, you can think of them as, you know, out of the tube, they're kind of like butter, right? They're thick and pasty, right? Add a little water, they kind of go to being like the consistency of cream. Add a little more, they're kind of the consistency of milk, and a little more, they become like tea. So I'm using paints that are of in the milk stage, but when I put down that first coat, the raw sienna, I have quite a bit of water in this little container. And so this is closer to tea. So when I'm putting that first layer of paint down, wetting the paper a lot. So when I add the other colors to it, they're now moving around because it's on a wet surface.
Oh, thanks for explaining that to me.
A lot of watercolorists will do a lot of what we refer to as glazing, where there's a lot of very thin coats and they very gradually build up color. I tend to use paint that's more in the milk to cream thickness a lot. And so a lot of pigment, a lot more pigment than water. And so there's enough water for it to move, but there's a lot of pigment. So I very quickly can get to the darker colors I want. I guess I'm not patient enough to go the slow route. And I like the spontaneity of the resulting look. Yes. Originally, I had planned to add a little bit more red. There's a little bit of reddish color there, but I think it looks nicer with just the yellows and oranges and greens. That's about all that I was going to finish. Actually, I am curious to reveal this bicyclist because you never know whether the masking tape is going to leak. And if it does, then I have to, no, that looks like that came out pretty clean. If there's leaking, I don't want to remove it from him because it's wet around him right now. If there's been leaking, and there was a little leaking around on her backside when I did peek earlier in the week, and I actually just blended those colors in. Well, this is an area where I had the masking tape on earlier than when I started to do the purple. And so you can see inside his bike wheel, he still has a lot of the yellow underpainting. I will come back. There's details of getting the feet in. There's a little hints of where the feet belong, but they're not really in there yet. So there's a lot more that I will do on the cyclists. It's kind of exciting because you get to see how the contrast is going to be with the background and whether you need to do any more work back there. Because the values, how dark they are is similar, a little bit darker in the greenery than in his back, but there's a lot of very similar, in terms of how dark the paint is. If you kind of squint down, you can see the values better. This value and that value are very similar in the terms of darkness, but I think there's still something just fine. I know he has a lot of light colors in the front end, so he'll be all right.
With these lovely bicyclists and their lycra, which you've captured so beautifully, and I love those you've actually chosen. They all complement so beautifully, and they pop. And with a little bit of the light hitting their helmets, it's almost like it's photogenic. How long did that take you to paint these lovely bicyclists? I guess that just to get their definition in, if you like.
They probably took about 6 hours, I would say, to get them as far along as I have them. These areas that I saved to be totally white, there's going to be some light shadow on her helmet, and the little openings that are in the helmets, will be brought out. So there's more work. Yeah. Guy's helmet I brought almost to completion. As you can see, kind of painting out right over the masking tape so that it comes right up to the edge, and I don't have to worry about trying to paint around them. I'm so loose in my brush work that that would drive me nuts.
I love the shadows you've got on the road too. They've come up beautifully, the shadows all in front of the bicycles and underneath them as well.
Yeah, I actually painted all of that before I painted any of the riders and the beginnings of the bikes. The bikes are drawn, everything was drawn, and I knew where they were. But so it was really weird. I had shadows before I had bicycles.
Your methodology and your approach is unique for me, anyway, because, I've seen it done the opposite way, if you like, in some ways, but everyone, you find your way. And that's the thing with watercolor. I don't think there's just one way. I feel that you can approach it as you're demonstrating today in a number of different ways, and you can mix water as you've done with, you've got watercolor, plus you've got fluid acrylics, which you've made to have the same consistency as watercolor.
Right. Yeah, so a little bit of fluid acrylic I ended up putting on here is in this area in the darkest shadows, because there are a lot of the orange and yellows when I was doing the first wash had run over under these, and you can still, well, I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up.
Yes.
But I can still see that there is a yellow glow under here, which I like, and I'm glad it's in there.
Yeah.
But the water, when I put the watercolor on initially, there was just not the nice pretty purple that I wanted.
Great. So you've got a bit more work to do on this painting that you're doing now. Today it's been a great insight just to have a bit of a look of what you're doing. So I can't wait to see the finished work. And people can find out more about you on your website, and also on Art with Sylvie. There'll be a link there to you as well, and we'll put you on the social media. So if people want to, share this great, very short but fly on the wall experience with April, they should hit the like button, but also don't forget to share the button and put it on your website, or put it on your Facebook. So we'd love to see what you think of today's video with April, and thank you very much, April, again for being with us.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Cool.